The slap echoed in the high-end restaurant, a sharp crack of porcelain and pride. Anya Reed, a brilliant tech CEO at just 28, felt the sting on her cheek, but her gaze never wavered. Officer Thorne, his face a mask of smug arrogance, leaned in close, enjoying the terrified silence of the room. "You think your money protects you from a little lesson in respect?" he sneered. Anya didn't move. She didn't speak. She just watched him, every second measured, every word remembered. The room held its breath, waiting for the young woman to break, to crumble. But the only thing that broke was Thorne's confidence, as a towering figure in military uniform walked into the room, his eyes fixed on the scene. And in that moment, Anya knew one thing. Thorne had no idea who he had really just slapped. What happens next will leave you speechless. Hit that subscribe button to watch the full story unfold, and get ready to see a powerful lesson in justice. Anya Reed was 28 years old, and in her short time, she'd already built a technology company worth millions. Raised by a single father in rural Alabama after her mother left when she was 5, Anya understood that every gain in life was hard-won. Her father, a proud Army veteran, had taught her that success wasn't about luck. It was about showing up, even when the world told you to stay home. Right now, standing in a luxurious steakhouse in downtown Atlanta, she felt the kind of sharp, cold fear that had nothing to do with finance and everything to do with history. The air in the private dining room had turned thick and toxic. Officer Thorne, a towering white man in his late 30s whose uniform seemed 2 sizes too tight for his inflated sense of authority, was leaning in close. A simple disagreement over a misplaced reservation had curdled into something uglier, something racial and terrifying. Anya's investors and staff sat frozen, their faces pale under the crystal chandeliers. Thorne, smelling blood in the water, saw her composure as a challenge and her silence as an insult to his badge. "I asked you a question, miss," Thorne sneered, his voice dropping low enough to make the veins on his neck stand out. "You think your money makes you immune to following the law?" Anya opened her mouth to speak, ready to explain that she hadn't broken any laws, that she was simply trying to eat dinner. But before a single syllable could escape her lips, Thorne's hand moved. It was a swift, shocking flash of white against the dark mahogany of the table and the rich brown of her skin. The slap echoed in the silence of the room like a gunshot. Anya staggered back a step, the heat of the impact stinging her cheek and the humiliation flooding her senses like ice water. She tasted blood inside her mouth. The world seemed to wobble for a painful, endless second, but the training her father had drilled into her, stand straight, never break, kicked in. She forced herself to meet Thorne's vicious gaze, her eyes watering but her expression defiant. She refused to give him the satisfaction of seeing her cry or crumble in public. Just as Thorne raised his hand again, fueled by the silence and his own adrenaline, a figure appeared in the doorway. He was a man whose presence commanded immediate silence, an older gentleman in a crisp, dark suit that bore the unmistakable markings of immense power. It was General Sterling, a name known in military circles as much for his integrity as his rank. The general stood stock-still, taking in the scene, the startled diners, the raging officer, and the young CEO trying desperately to hold herself together. Thorne saw him, but the rage had blinded him. He simply tightened his jaw and prepared to strike Anya again, ignoring the general entirely. The moment stretched taut, like a rubber band pulled to its breaking point. Officer Thorne, his face twisted in a sneer of pure, unwarranted hate, was clearly beyond the point of reason. He lifted his hand, flexing his fingers slightly, ready to deliver a backhand that would finish the job the first blow had started. Anya braced herself, not willing to run, even as her body screamed for escape. The general in the doorway, Sterling, remained silent, his expression unreadable, his military bearing the only thing that stopped the other diners from erupting into chaos. Thorne dropped his hand, not because of the general, but because he saw the flicker of something unbreakable in Anya's eyes, and that angered him more than any resistance. Instead, he grabbed the cuffs of his trousers, preparing to drag her out. He clearly felt immune to consequences. Anya's mind raced, not about the pain, but about the impending loss of dignity. She thought of her father, Marcus, who had worked 2 jobs to send her to college, who had always said that their name was all they truly owned. In that brief, excruciating moment of stillness, General Sterling finally moved. He took 3 deliberate, slow steps into the room, his eyes fixed not on Thorne, but on Anya. There was a brief, almost imperceptible nod, a gesture of respect that told her he saw her, truly saw her, not as a suspect or a victim, but as a warrior. Anya remembered sitting on the floor of their cramped, loving living room, studying late into the night while her father worked. She had clawed her way up from nothing, fueled by his sacrifice. She had been a child of necessity, learning to code on a dusty, hand-me-down computer. Her early years were marked by the smell of soldering irons and the sound of her father's gentle but firm voice reciting the Army values: loyalty, duty, respect, selfless service, honor, integrity, and personal courage. She had applied that courage to business, building Innovatech from a dorm room project into a major player in the Southeast. That courage was all she had left now, facing a man who thought her life was a joke. Thorne, now distracted by the general's approach, muttered a vile, racist slur under his breath, leaning his face close to Anya's bruised cheek. It was a final, cruel flourish of his power play, designed to break her spirit privately before he hauled her out publicly. He pushed her, a hard, unnecessary shove that sent her stumbling back. He then puffed out his chest and shouted, loud enough for the entire restaurant to hear, "I'm taking her in. Nobody stops an officer on duty." Thorne's shout of defiance bounced off the expensive, silenced walls, a moment of extreme tension that hung in the air. The general, standing tall and utterly still, let the silence swallow Thorne's bluster whole. Then, without raising his voice, without ever taking his eyes off Anya, Sterling spoke. His voice was low, gravelly, and carried the effortless authority of a man who had commanded thousands. "Officer," he said, the title cutting through the restaurant like a knife, "you will release the citizen." Thorne turned, his face flushed with confusion and indignation. "Sir, I don't know who you think you are, but you cannot interfere with an arrest." The general didn't move, didn't argue. He simply produced a small, silver coin from his pocket and flicked it across the table. It landed near Thorne, shimmering beneath the light. It wasn't a badge or a shield, but a unique, engraved military challenge coin of the highest order. Thorne's eyes widened, his bravado instantly draining away, replaced by a terrible realization. He recognized the significance of the coin and the rank of the man before him. "You will step back from Ms. Reed," the general continued, his voice now colder than ice. "You will apologize for your behavior. And then, officer, you will salute her. Do it now." The demand was absolute. It was a public, total humiliation delivered as a direct order. Thorne's face was a mask of agony, his jaw clenching so hard that Anya heard his teeth grind. Every inch of his pride fought against the command, but the general's gaze was unyielding, backed by a power far greater than the city police force. With a visible tremble, Thorne reluctantly took a step back. The less extreme event played out in excruciating slow motion as he forced the words out. "Ma'am," he choked out, the word tasting like ash to him, "I apologize for my conduct. It was uncalled for." The apology was flat and emotionless, but it was done. He then straightened his uniform, his movements stiff and resentful. He brought his hand up, palm flat, and rendered a formal, perfect salute to Anya Reed, the black CEO he had just slapped. The crowd gasped, a low, collective sound of disbelief. Anya simply watched, her heart thumping a victory march against her ribs. She didn't acknowledge the salute, didn't return it. She simply stared at the man who had tried to break her. When Thorne dropped his arm, his eyes, dark and full of venom, locked onto hers one last time. It was a promise of future pain, a silent, extreme vow of revenge that chilled Anya to the core. "This isn't over," his eyes screamed. "You may have won this moment, but I will ruin you." The restaurant scene collapsed into a frenzy of whispers and camera flashes. Anya, with her team buzzing around her, managed to extract herself from the chaos. The less extreme event followed shortly after, A quiet, surreal meeting with General Sterling outside the restaurant's back entrance. He didn't offer a dramatic explanation, just a shared glance that acknowledged the injustice and the strange, sudden victory. "Your father would be proud, Anya," the general said, his voice surprisingly gentle. "You knew my dad, Marcus?" Anya asked, still touching her throbbing cheek. The general's eyes softened, a faint sadness passing over his rigid features. He nodded slowly. "We served together. A good man. A principled man. He taught me a lot about resilience, even in the worst moments." He didn't elaborate, simply handed her a plain, thick white business card and walked away, his mystery intact. His reference to her father's resilience brought back a flood of memories for Anya, triggering the long-held pain she kept locked away. She drove home to her sleek, modern Atlanta high-rise apartment, but her mind was back in that small Alabama house. Her father had always been her compass. She recalled one summer when she'd failed a math competition she desperately wanted to win. She was 12, heartbroken, and ready to quit everything. Her father didn't lecture or coddle. He took her to an old, cracked basketball court behind their church. "We don't quit, Anya," Marcus had said, his voice firm, tossing her a worn-out basketball. "We adapt. You learn to fight on the court you're given." He made her shoot hundreds of hoops that day until her arms ached, teaching her that failure was just feedback. That night, she didn't just feel better, she felt stronger. She applied that same fierce determination to business, which is how she survived the slap today. The extreme event now unfolded. Later that night, going through a box of her father's belongings she hadn't looked at since his funeral, Anya found it. Tucked deep beneath his old folded flag was a heavily taped manila envelope. Inside, she found his discharge papers, but stapled to the back was a grainy, copied photo. The photo showed her father in uniform, shaking hands with a younger, smiling General Sterling. Below the photo, scrawled in her father's typescript, was a cryptic note, Code Phoenix. "Never forget the betrayal." The connection wasn't just friendship, it was something deep, secret, and military. The sight of the photo and the words Code Phoenix sent a tremor of deep unease through Anya. Her father, Marcus, had never talked about his time in the military much beyond vague, proud statements about service. She only knew he had left before he was eligible for a full pension, claiming he needed to be home to raise her. Now, seeing him with General Sterling, an officer of such extreme rank, suggested a history far more complicated than she ever imagined. This was the lingering ghost of the extreme event from the last chapter, the secret revealed. Anya spread out the contents of the envelope on her polished kitchen island. She remembered her father's rigid dedication to honor. He was the kind of man who would return a penny if he got too much change. It was this unwavering integrity that had sometimes put him at odds with the world, and she wondered if that same honor had led him to an early, forced exit from the service. The less extreme event unfolded as she picked up a laminated ID card, the image of a younger, vibrant Marcus smiling back at her. She realized, with a sudden, painful clarity, that she barely knew the man he was before he became her father. She thought of a lesson he taught her on their yearly camping trip to the Appalachian Mountains. She was trying to climb a steep, slick rock face and kept failing, scraping her hands and nearly falling. Marcus hadn't pulled her up. Instead, he'd pointed to a tiny, barely visible fissure in the stone. "You don't look at the top, Anya. You look at the next inch. You focus on the foothold right in front of your nose, and you make it stick." He made her understand that sometimes the biggest obstacles are conquered by focusing on the smallest, least significant details. She felt the same way now, staring at the small, crucial details in this envelope. She began to search the documents, scanning for any mention of the word betrayal. She found letters, commendations, and a formal commendation letter with a strange black smear over a section of text. It looked deliberately censored. The air in the apartment felt heavy now, charged with the weight of her father's secret history. She recognized the scent of old paper and something else, the familiar smell of injustice. The extreme event arrived in the form of a thick, tightly folded piece of paper found taped to the back of the discharge certificate. It was a single, typed sheet, and though most of the content was technical military jargon, one paragraph leaped out at her. It described a critical mission failure, and ended with a boilerplate statement that the incident was closed, with all personnel cleared of wrongdoing. However, beneath the official sign-off, Marcus had scrawled a single sentence in bright red ink: "They lied." This was a cover-up. Now Anya knew, without a shadow of a doubt, that the reason for her father's quiet, complicated life was wrapped up in a dangerous, decades-old military conspiracy. What happens next is unbelievable. Hit that subscribe button and the bell so you don't miss a single moment of this story. Anya sat at her kitchen island, the red ink of her father's message, "They lied." This was a cover-up, searing into her mind. The phrase Code Phoenix sounded less like a military operation and more like a tombstone. Anya knew then that everything she had believed about her father's simple retirement and quiet life was a deliberate shield. The raw injustice of the slap now felt like a continuation of an old, ugly story, and she was determined to finish the chapter Marcus had started. Her investigation began immediately. As the CEO of a successful tech company, she had access to resources and digital tools most people didn't. She tried every angle, searching military archives, cross-referencing public contractor records, and using deep web search algorithms to find any mention of Code Phoenix or her father's unit during that time. The less extreme event was the sheer, mind-numbing silence she encountered. Every official search hit a wall of bureaucracy or, worse, returned perfectly clean, sterilized files that contradicted her father's frantic note. It was as if the mission had been meticulously wiped from existence. The paper trail was too clean, the digital footprint non-existent. She had her assistant make a request for a meeting with General Sterling, citing a sensitive family matter. The general's office replied with a polite but firm decline, citing a packed schedule. They even suggested she contact the Department of Veterans Affairs for assistance, a dismissive brush-off that felt like a slap in its own right. Anya realized that if she asked nicely, she would get nowhere. The people who had orchestrated the cover-up were still powerful, still running the show. She stared at the note, her anger giving way to a cold, focused resolve. She couldn't shake the feeling of being watched, a strange, prickling sensation on the back of her neck that she hadn't felt since the moment Officer Thorne had locked eyes with her in the restaurant. She got up, paced her luxurious apartment, and felt the immense isolation of her quest. Just as she was about to put the journal away, her phone buzzed with an untraceable text message. The message contained only a picture. It was a close-up of her father's original Code Phoenix note, but this copy was slightly torn, clearly photographed recently. A new warning, handwritten in thick, dark marker across the image, stared back at her. The message was chilling, brutal, and simple. Dig deeper, break your own neck. The text message was the extreme event that shattered any doubt in Anya's mind. This wasn't just a cold case, it was an active conspiracy. Someone powerful knew exactly what she had, and they were watching her every move. The cold fear quickly hardened into a resolve born of vengeance. The warning didn't scare her, it narrowed her focus. She knew the source had to be connected to the military or the Rhodes family, the corporate villains Sterling hinted at. Anya abandoned subtle requests. She dressed in a power suit that felt like armor and drove straight to a major veterans charity gala she knew General Sterling was hosting that night. She crashed the party, bypassing security with a determination that unnerved the staff. Finding Sterling in a quiet corner, talking to a local senator, she didn't mince words. She held up her phone, displaying the menacing text message without saying a word. Sterling's expression, usually stone, shifted instantly to concern. He dismissed the senator and led Anya to a private gallery. Their conversation was a necessary, less extreme event of careful information exchange. "I cannot risk my position, Anya," he whispered, his eyes scanning the room. "But I can tell you this, your father was investigating a massive fraud. A military contractor was using shell companies to charge the Pentagon millions for phantom services. Marcus had the evidence ready to go public." "Who was the contractor?" Anya demanded, her voice tight. Sterling took a deep breath, his silence a terrible confirmation of the danger. "The Rhodes Group," he finally admitted. owned by a man named Howard Rhodes, a multimillionaire with friends in very high places. When your father found the proof, Rhodes's son, a captain at the time, made sure the mission failed to silence him. It was neatly labeled an unfortunate accident. Sterling then delivered the final, devastating blow, the extreme event that clicked the puzzle pieces together. He explained that Howard Rhodes's family had pushed their youngest son, Thorne, to join the city police force after he flunked out of business school. "The officer who slapped you, Anya? That's Officer Thorne Rhodes. His father, the contractor owner, is Captain Rhodes. They are one family. That confrontation wasn't random, child. It was a dog barking at the daughter of the man who ruined their reputation." The realization that Officer Thorne Rhodes wasn't just a racist cop, but a puppet in a generational feud, gave Anya a terrible sense of clarity. The slap wasn't just about disrespect. It was about power, corruption, and the lingering shadow of the Rhodes family's betrayal of her father. This emotional gut punch triggered a powerful, necessary flashback, a memory of the first time deep betrayal had nearly broken her. The narrative shifted years into the past, to the small, windowless office where Innovatech had been born. Anya and her best friend, Bryn Hayes, were glued to two mismatched monitors, fueled by cheap instant coffee and the dream of changing the world with their software. Bryn, with her quiet genius for coding, was the perfect complement to Anya's fearless business drive. The less extreme event of this chapter was the pure, shared struggle. They ate ramen for dinner every night, shared one worn-out futon in their cramped workspace, and vowed that no matter what, they would always have each other's backs. Anya recalled the high-stakes moment that would define their bond and break it forever. She had secured a meeting with a top-tier venture capitalist, a deal that would finally give Innovatech the seven-figure funding it needed to explode. It was a presentation that had taken weeks to polish, built around a revolutionary new data management algorithm they had created together. Anya felt a familiar, nervous confidence as she prepared to walk into the VC's office. Bryn had been strangely quiet that morning, her eyes darting away from Anya's gaze. The presentation was flawless, but when the VC partner reviewed their code documentation, his face tightened. He slid a piece of paper across the table, a confidentiality agreement with a small, rival firm. "We love the idea, Ms. Reed," the VC said slowly. "But this core algorithm, we already saw it. Your co-founder, Bryn Hayes, sold the license to this component last week. She filed it under an anonymous shell company and signed over the rights." The extreme event struck Anya like a physical blow. Bryn, her sister-in-arms, the person she trusted with her life, had secretly sold a vital piece of their intellectual property to a competitor, pulling the rug out from under their future moments before it was realized. The moment the venture capitalist spoke the words, "Your co-founder sold the license," Anya felt her stomach drop, a dizzying nausea that matched the betrayal she now felt learning about the Rhodes family. She hadn't just lost the deal, she had lost her foundation. The extreme event had begun. She fled the office and found Bryn back at their messy workspace, typing furiously, trying to act normal. The confrontation was brutal and immediate. Anya didn't scream. She spoke in a low, dangerous tone that Bryn instantly recognized as pure, focused fury. "You ruined us, Bryn. Why?" The less extreme event followed as Bryn crumbled, her composure dissolving into ragged, wrenching sobs. Through gasping breaths, Bryn revealed a secret she had desperately hidden for months. Her mother, who was uninsured, had been diagnosed with a severe, aggressive form of cancer. The hospital bills were astronomical, the kind that destroy families. Bryn thought she was only selling a temporary license, a small piece, enough to pay for a crucial, life-saving surgery. She truly believed she could replace the code before Anya ever found out, desperate to keep the money coming while protecting her friend's dream. Anya listened, her heart torn. She understood desperation, but she couldn't forgive the deceit. Bryn had risked everything, including Anya's entire future, for a secret. "We were supposed to do this together, Bryn," Anya whispered, the heartbreak palpable. "We had to trust each other. You broke the fundamental rule." Anya spent 2 agonizing days working through the legal consequences. Bryn's motive was sympathetic, but the damage was irreparable. Anya realized she couldn't run a multi-million-dollar company on pity or broken promises. The extreme event was Anya's final, devastating decision. She had to cut Bryn out completely. She hired a lawyer, redrafted the company structure, and walked into the office on a rainy Tuesday morning. She placed a stack of termination papers and a severance check on Bryn's desk, enough money to cover the medical debt, but not enough to buy back the trust. "I can't build a future with someone who can't tell me the truth," Anya said, her voice shaking, sealing the end of their friendship forever and learning a cruel lesson about the price of power. The memory of Bryn's betrayal, raw and painful even now, was the first real-world lesson Anya had in the cost of secrets, a lesson now repeating itself with the Rhodes family. Back in the present, Anya felt she needed to touch base with her only true, unwavering comfort, her mother, Eleanor. Anya drove out to the quiet, single-story house where Eleanor lived, still struggling with the void Marcus had left behind. The visit was a quiet, less extreme event of shared grief and simple comfort. They sat on the front porch swing, sipping sweet tea, and watching the summer humidity haze the trees. Anya didn't mention the slap or the Rhodes family yet. She simply spoke of her father, of his quiet strength. Eleanor, her eyes distant, finally shared a memory that had been nagging her for weeks: Marcus's last days. He was jumpy, Anya. Always on the phone, speaking low, talking about securing the asset and cleaning up the mess. He started keeping a small, leather book under his pillow, not a Bible, just a book. He was worried, honey. He said if anything ever happened, I needed to keep it safe, but never open it. The weight of this secret had been slowly crushing Eleanor. Marcus had been insistent that the book was only to be found by Anya if he died in a way that wasn't clean. Eleanor had never understood what he meant, but she had dutifully kept her promise, moving the journal to a place she felt was truly secure. Now, seeing the look in her daughter's eyes, the same fierce determination she had seen in Marcus, Eleanor knew the time for secrets was over. She stood up abruptly and led Anya to the master bedroom. She pulled back a carpet tile near the closet, revealing a small, hidden lockbox. She opened it and pulled out a worn, leather-bound book, the journal Marcus had kept in his final, fearful days. This was the final, devastating extreme event that Anya needed. She took the book, her hands trembling. On the first page, Marcus had not written a date or a greeting, but a single, heartbreaking sentence that confirmed all her fears and named the man responsible for the cover-up. Captain Rhodes looked me in the eye and left us to die. Enjoying this story? Hit the like button. It helps us know you want more stories like this. Anya stared at the chilling sentence in her father's journal. Captain Rhodes looked me in the eye and left us to die. It was a gut punch, the final, undeniable proof she needed. The slap, the revenge vow, the threats, it all clicked into a terrifying, decades-long story of betrayal. The extreme event had come to life, and it was even more personal than she could have imagined. She immediately called General Sterling. His voice was grim as she read him the line from the journal. He knew, just by the tone in her voice, that the game had changed. The next morning, the less extreme event unfolded as they met in a quiet, anonymous cafe. Anya laid the journal, the manila envelope, and her father's censored discharge papers on the table. General Sterling, his face etched with weary sadness, went through each page, confirming the facts with a few terse nods. Marcus was one of the best soldiers I ever knew, Sterling said quietly. He was on to something big, a web of military corruption so tangled, no one wanted to touch it. He found the evidence, but before he could get it to the right people, his mission went dark. They cross-referenced the journal's dates and locations with the grainy photo Anya found. The photo showed Marcus shaking hands with a younger Sterling, but in the background, a third man stood in the shadows. With a shock of recognition, Sterling identified him: Captain Rhodes, Officer Thorne's father. He was a bitter man, Sterling explained. Always resentful that Marcus, a man from a poor family, had a better career and a stronger moral compass. Rhodes's family had their hands deep in the government's pockets, and they were desperate to protect their business. Then came the final, extreme event of their meeting. As they were packing up, Anya's phone buzzed with an alert from a news service she followed. The headline was about the upcoming retirement of a powerful, longtime senator. The accompanying article mentioned the senator's previous role as chairman of the Senate Armed Services Committee. Sterling's face went white. He grabbed the journal and pointed to a cryptic entry about an upcoming committee review. "He was involved, Anya," Sterling said, his voice a low growl. "The cover-up goes all the way to the top." The senator's name was the final piece of the puzzle, and with it, the full scope of the conspiracy came crashing down. The new extreme event was the devastating truth of her father's death. Anya and Sterling needed to understand every last detail to fight back. The only way was to dive back into the journal, to relive the final painful mission through Marcus's eyes. The less extreme event was the slow, meticulous retelling of Marcus's last moments. The journal entries were not grand or heroic, but matter of fact. They described a routine mission to secure a military asset. The team had been successful, but as they were awaiting extraction, their radio went dead. Marcus had tried every channel, but there was no response. The journal then described how a small private military jet, marked with the Rhodes Group's logo, had flown low over their position, its pilot giving a quick, almost imperceptible salute to the team on the ground. The journal entry that followed was frantic, describing how Rhodes, back at headquarters, had deliberately delayed a critical air support team. The climax of the flashback was the horrifying, extreme event. The journal entry detailing the moment Captain Rhodes sent a false radio transmission to headquarters. He had claimed Marcus's team had been neutralized by hostile forces, a blatant lie to ensure no one would come looking for them. He had a private jet on standby to pick up the military asset before anyone else could get to it. The journal described the feeling of being abandoned, the realization that the sabotage wasn't an accident. It was a personal act of vengeance by Rhodes. Marcus's final entry was a chilling and courageous one, detailing how he had secured the evidence of the cover-up and hidden it, making it clear in the journal that he would rather die fighting for the truth than be silenced. The brutal truth of her father's final moments was a fire in Anya's soul. The slap from Thorne was no longer an isolated incident. It was an act of generational karma, a sick form of revenge for a son's twisted loyalty to his father. Anya's resolve had been hardened by Bryn's betrayal, but this was a different kind of pain. This was about legacy and justice. Anya and Sterling sat together, no longer just allies but partners in a war for truth. They began to formulate their plan, the less extreme event of the chapter. They knew they couldn't go to the military or the police. The corruption went too deep. Anya decided to use her company, her platform, and her public presence to expose the truth. They meticulously scanned the journal's pages, cross-referencing names, dates, and locations with public records and old newspaper clippings. The work was slow, methodical, and tense, a quiet storm building. They found a few key names, old, retired officers who were close to the mission and now lived far away. The extreme event crashed down when a simple financial record led them to the retired senator. They discovered a series of consulting fees from the Rhodes Group to a company owned by the senator's wife. The payments, totaling in the millions, had begun a week after Marcus's mission was declared a closed case. Anya's blood ran cold. The senator had used his immense political power to squash any investigation into the failed mission, ensuring both the Rhodes family and his own would stay clean. She now had the motive, the method, and the man at the top. She had all the pieces to a very dangerous puzzle. The retired senator, William Forrester, was a whole new level of enemy. The man had spent his life in the shadows, pulling strings and making problems disappear. He wasn't just a part of the conspiracy. He was the final brick in the wall of silence. The extreme event had left Anya and Sterling with a terrifying realization. They were up against someone who could make people vanish. They had to find a way to get to him without getting caught in his web. The less extreme event was their next move, finding a way to connect him directly to the cover-up. Through his records, they found the name of a former aide, Bethany Cole, who had mysteriously resigned from his office the same week the payments from the Rhodes Group started. They tracked her down to a quiet suburban neighborhood in Washington, D.C. She was nervous and agreed to meet in a public park, her eyes darting around as if expecting trouble. Bethany admitted she knew about the shady payments. She had been tasked with moving the money through a series of shell corporations. When she had tried to question it, Forrester had threatened her family. Just as Bethany pulled out a small thumb drive, a black car suddenly screeched to a halt nearby. The doors flew open, and a man ran toward them, his face hidden by a hat pulled low. He was moving fast, a predatory look in his eyes. Bethany's face twisted in terror. She recognized him. He was a former security detail for the senator. "He found out!" she screamed, her voice shrill with panic. The man lunged at her, his hand clamping over her mouth. In a moment of pure instinct, she threw the thumb drive to Anya. As she was dragged toward the car, she managed to get one final terrifying warning out, a whispered plea as her body was forced into the vehicle. "You're next!" The aide's words, her face a mask of terror, echoed in Anya's ears as she clutched the thumb drive. She felt the car roar away, leaving the park in stunned silence. The extreme event had just unfolded, and she knew she was no longer just investigating. She was in a fight for her life. There was no going back, no chance of a quiet reveal. They had to get the truth out immediately, before the senator could silence them both. The less extreme event was the assembly of her most trusted team. Anya went to her office and gathered her head of legal, her lead software engineer, and her head of communications. She laid out the entire story, from her father's mission to the Rhodes family's betrayal and the senator's complicity. They all listened in stunned silence, their faces shifting from disbelief to a shared look of fierce, unblinking loyalty. She told them her plan, to use the company's live stream platform for a press conference, to broadcast all the evidence at once to millions of people. It was the only way to be safe, by making the truth public and undeniable. The team worked through the night, a silent, tense operation. They prepared the video files, the scanned documents, and the bank statements from the thumb drive. They were minutes from going live, the red on-air light blinking ominously on their control panel. Anya felt a sense of calm, the quiet before the storm. She was about to give her father the justice he deserved. Suddenly, alarms blared through the office. A message flashed on every screen, an extreme event that felt like a punch to the gut: unauthorized access. Network integrity compromised. It was a massive, coordinated cyber attack designed to delete all the files, corrupt the evidence, and shut down the broadcast. Anya watched the progress bar for her live stream stall at 99%. A final, cruel message appeared on her screen, a message that connected the present to her father's tragic past: mission failure. Just like your father's. Share this with a friend. Send it to someone who needs to see this powerful message. The chilling message, mission failure. Just like your father's, burned on Anya's screen. It was the extreme event that threatened to erase months of dangerous work. The corporate espionage and cyber attack were clearly coordinated by the Rhodes family and Senator Forrester's people. As her lead engineer frantically tried to fight the intrusion, the attack intensified, locking them out of the main server. They were minutes away from losing everything, and the red on-air light was a constant, mocking reminder of their failure to launch. In the midst of the chaos, a quiet voice cut through the panic. "I know that firewall. I helped build it." Anya turned to see Bryn Hayes, her betrayed former partner, standing in the doorway. The less extreme event was this unexpected arrival. After their brutal split, Bryn had gone into freelance security consulting, specializing in breaking the very defenses she once helped create. Bryn hadn't come for forgiveness. She came because she saw the live broadcast feed on a news app and recognized the names: Thorne Rhodes and his corrupt father. She realized Anya wasn't just chasing money. She was chasing justice for her dad, a man Bryn had respected. Anya hesitated for only a second, the memory of the betrayal still sharp, but desperation won. "Can you get us back in?" Bryn nodded, her face grim. "I can bypass their back door. But it's risky. I need full control of one terminal." Bryn went to work, her fingers flying across the keyboard with the furious, precise speed of a master coder. She talked through the process, explaining how the attackers had used a zero-day exploit disguised as a system update. Just as Bryn broke the encryption, She found the origin IP address, an old, disconnected military server. The extreme event came as Bryn tracked the user ID on that server. It wasn't Captain Rhodes. It was Howard Rhodes, the powerful father, acting as the mastermind, trying to protect his name and legacy at all costs. The confirmation that Howard Rhodes, the head of the corrupt contractor group, was running the cyber attack was the extreme event that elevated the stakes from a personal vendetta to a corporate and political takedown. Bryn, successfully shunting the deleted files to a secured cloud server, worked with Anya's team to prep the files for broadcast. Meanwhile, Anya received a cryptic message from General Sterling. He had lured Officer Thorne Rhodes and his father, Captain Rhodes, to a meeting under the pretense of a final settlement from the military contractor group. Sterling had them waiting in an empty, sterile conference room, ready for the final confrontation. This was the less extreme event, the calm before the storm. Anya walked into the room, flanked by General Sterling and her head of legal. The atmosphere was immediately toxic. Captain Rhodes, a thick-set man with a smug, entitled look, stood up. "I thought this was a quiet negotiation, Sterling. Not a trap." Officer Thorne, who had slapped Anya, looked terrified and defensive, still wearing a smug sneer as if to cover his anxiety. Anya didn't let them talk. She simply placed Marcus's journal on the table, open to the page detailing the betrayal. "This isn't a negotiation, Captain Rhodes," Anya said, her voice steady and lethal. "This is your reckoning." The captain scoffed, but Thorne looked physically sick, his eyes fixed on the journal. The extreme event was the unmasking. Anya looked straight at Thorne. "You humiliated me in public to avenge your father, who betrayed my father and left him to die 20 years ago. You thought I was just a rich girl. I'm the girl who finishes the job." The conference room confrontation ended with Captain Rhodes realizing the gravity of the evidence Anya possessed. The journal, combined with the financial records linking him to Senator Forrester, was undeniable. This chapter began with the less extreme event, Anya walking away from the confrontation and straight into her press conference. The broadcast went live from her company headquarters. Millions of people tuned in. Anya didn't use flowery language. She used facts. She started with the slap, the public act of racism and abuse of power by Officer Thorne Rhodes. Then she systematically presented the digital evidence. The Rhodes Group's fraudulent billing schemes, the senator's vast payments, the journal entries, and the final, damning evidence of Captain Rhodes's deliberate sabotage of her father's mission. The nation watched in stunned silence as a successful black female CEO dismantled a decades-old military-industrial conspiracy in real time. As the press conference concluded, the extreme event occurred. Senator Forrester, watching the broadcast from his luxurious, secluded estate, saw his carefully constructed empire crumbling. He knew the FBI and military investigators would be at his door within the hour. In a panic, he made a fatal decision. He called a national news outlet, not to deny the allegations, but to try and mitigate his own involvement. He confessed to accepting the payments from Howard Rhodes, but claimed he thought they were legitimate consulting fees. Then, he delivered the final twist to the Rhodes family's downfall. He revealed that Officer Thorne Rhodes, in a desperate attempt to cover his tracks after the slap, had used his badge to tamper with an unrelated traffic stop database to create a fake arrest record for Anya. It was a petty, final crime that instantly turned the public against the entire Rhodes family. The fallout from the press conference was swift and absolute. Within hours, warrants were issued. Captain Rhodes and Howard Rhodes were arrested, facing charges ranging from fraud to conspiracy and negligent homicide related to the cover-up. Officer Thorne Rhodes, his pathetic attempt at revenge revealed by the senator, was stripped of his badge and booked for abuse of power and falsifying official records. The system, once manipulated by their wealth, was now consuming them whole. The less extreme event was the quiet moment of closure Anya shared with General Sterling. He visited her apartment, not as a general, but as a friend of Marcus. He congratulated her on her bravery, acknowledging the immense personal risk she had taken. "Your father used his honor as his shield, Anya. You used his honor as your sword. It's what this country needs." Sterling promised to ensure Marcus Reed's name was officially cleared and that the truth of Code Phoenix would be properly documented in military history. The final, extreme event was a silent, powerful scene played out in a sterile police holding area. Anya had insisted on being there, not to gloat, but to ensure the closure was real. Officer Thorne Rhodes was brought out in handcuffs and a standard prison uniform, his posture slumped, his face hollow. He was arrogant no more. The shame had finally broken through his thick skin. He looked up, saw Anya standing there, and the hate in his eyes was replaced by a look of devastating, complete defeat. He was stripped of his power, his family's influence, and his uniform, the very things he had used to strike her. As he was led away, a single, fat tear of pure humiliation rolled down his cheek, an acknowledgment of his utter destruction by the woman he had tried to break. With justice served, the extreme pressure finally eased. The final chapter began with the less extreme event, Anya visiting her father's gravesite. The day was bright and peaceful. She laid the worn, leather journal on the polished headstone, a final, tangible offering of truth. She no longer felt the burning need for vengeance, only a deep, profound sense of peace. Her father was vindicated, his legacy restored not just by a military report, but by his own daughter's courage. She realized that the slap, the betrayal, and the danger had not broken her, they had forged her. The final poetic twist was revealed when Anya read a letter General Sterling had slipped into the journal. The letter wasn't addressed to Anya, but to Marcus, dated 10 years earlier. It explained that Sterling had been instructed by Marcus to look out for Anya, but never to interfere unless her life or reputation was on the line. Sterling confessed that he had retired from his command early, not because of age, but because he used his remaining influence to quietly redirect Innovateca's early government contracts, ensuring Anya's company had a steady lifeline when Bryn's betrayal hit. General Sterling wasn't just a friend who showed up. He was a secret mentor, a silent guardian fulfilling a promise to his fallen comrade. The story concluded with Anya deciding to use the millions she recovered from the Rhodes Group's assets to establish the Marcus Reed Foundation for Empathy and Justice, a non-profit dedicated to supporting veterans who expose corruption. She transformed her pain into purpose, using her power not for revenge, but for kindness. The Foundation's first major donation went to Bryn's mother's hospital fund, a final act of grace that showed she had truly healed from the betrayal. Anya stood on a stage, addressing a massive crowd at the Foundation's launch. She looked out at the faces, both black and white, young and old, and spoke of how fear and hate are just loud ways of asking for help, and that the only true power is the power to be kind. The path to justice is always rough, she concluded, looking directly into the camera. But when you stand on the truth, nothing can knock you down. If you want to see how Anya rebuilds her friendship with Bryn and what the next phase of the Marcus Reed Foundation looks like, let me know. Please be sure to like this video, subscribe for more content, and tell me in the comments what one word describes how Anya made you feel.